Come on, people, join. I want to see more people in the channel. Nothing happening yet.
You are live, Rowena.
Are we live?
Yeah.
Oh, well, that's good. We're live. Well, good evening, everyone. I do hope that you've all had a lovely day, and I am praying for peace that we all deserve. Now, before I forget, in case the people who do know me have forgotten, I'm introducing myself. I'm Rowena Muldal. I was born in South Africa, and I grew up between my family members, with my gran hammering at me and telling me that I should go and discover my English roots one day. So, about 28 years ago, I did. I pulled my finger out, I saved up, and stepping off the plane into the drizzle and cold of an English morning at Heathrow, I felt as though I had closed a circle. Sadly, Caroline Stevens cannot be with us tonight due to some very other important commitments. So she has asked me to step in. She's also asked me if I will do a show highlighting the terrible manner in which a once civilized and first world status country is being destroyed, how a genocide is taking place, and nobody in the world seems interested in helping. The country that I describe is South Africa, which is rapidly sliding down the same chute into a massive pile of corruption and murder that destroyed Rhodesia, the place now renamed Zimbabwe. I have some lovely people who are joining me this evening, and they've got more expertise about what is happening in South Africa, especially now. We have Karen Smith of Radio Free South Africa. Karen, say hello.
Hi.
And we have Lee Oxley Dupree from the South African Family Relief Project. Lee.
Hi.
And we have Kuan Elgin, who is the author of Bulala, which is a true story of South Africa. He's joining us as well.
Good evening.
Right, to lay the groundwork on this whole situation, let me give as brief a history as I can for the country. Back in the 7th century, the Muslims were gaining rapid power in the middle of the Mediterranean area. No one was safe, least of all ships, and a once thriving and busy shipping lane became almost overnight a place of such extreme danger, piracy, and death. And that was if you were lucky enough not to be captured and sold as a slave, in which case you were doomed to suffer a slow and often agonizing death instead. People on the seas especially were no longer safe. As the Muslims began their depredations into Africa, the black people began a southward journey trying to escape these savages who murdered, tortured, raped, and captured at will. The once widely known famous Silk Road route became a desert, lined with bones, many skulls deep. The so-called Golden Age was not so much golden as red with the blood of innocents who refused to submit to Islam. The traders needed to find another way to the east, and so the Portuguese began seeking another route down the west coast of Africa and around the southern tip. One such intrepid adventurer, a Portuguese chap known as Bartholomew Dias, began this search for a route around Africa in 1488, but he only ever made it as far as Natal. However, it was actually Vasco da Gama who opened the sea route to India in 1497. None of these groups of sailors encountered any violent opposition as they stopped in at the Cape of Good Hope and Port Natal for fresh water along the route. There were no reports of any encounters with an indigenous people, which they would have written into their diaries because they were diligent record keepers. The first people of South Africa, the Khoisan, no doubt witnessed a lot of the navigation activity off the coast, but they continued to go about their business as hunter-gatherers. These were the people who occupied vast tracts of the land prior to the southward migration of the Bantu people from Central and Northeastern Africa. The Khoisan were a friendly group of petite, dark-skinned folk who ended up being hunted by the Xhosa, who were running south, trying to escape the predations of the Muslims who were taking them as slaves or murdering them. In addition, as a people with cattle, as the Xhosa came south, they brought them with. And sadly, the Khoisan had no concept of property, and every now and then they'd help themselves to a cow or two for food. The Xhosa, who were an extremely warlike group, did not look kindly upon this, and they basically hunted them almost into extinction over the years that followed Jan van Riebeeck's arrival in 1652, when he set up a trade office to replenish the supplies of the passing ships on the shores of Cape Town. Now, some of his group actually intermarried with the Khoisan, and this was how the Griquas, a mixed race, became part of the tapestry of the area. The arrival of slave ships in 1658 brought another human element to the growing culture, with some arriving as castaways and others replacing the more idle indigenous folk, the Khoisan, who were never subjected to hard labor. The remaining small groups of Khoisan dispersed, and today they occupy the Kalahari Desert and Namibia, which is up the west coast of Africa, where their ancient culture, although slowly adapting to modern influences, still plays an active role in their daily lives. The next large migration into southern Africa was with the arrival of the 1820 settlers. And as these different nationalities of people vied for land, conflict was inevitable, with the new arrivals needing space. So people began moving inland, and this is when they came into serious contact with the southward migrating Xhosa, who fought them in very bloody skirmishes. Because of the new British governors of the Cape, the Dutch stepped up their migration even further inland to it. They were trying to escape British rule, and it is this that gave rise to the two Boer republics, the Free State and the Transvaal. This culminated in the Anglo-Boer Wars when gold was discovered in President Kruger's Transvaal. The resultant camps, which basically were set up for the Second Boer War, were a terrible forerunner of what a prisoner of war camp would come to mean in the Second World War. So it was actually the Brits who brought about prisoner of war camps. And the deaths of many women, children, and fragile older people are still to this day left without an apology by Britain. General Jan Smuts tried to bring the Boer and the Brit together after the Anglo-Boer Wars, but it was a limited success. He was regarded by his own kind as a traitor to the Afrikaner cause, especially when committing South African troops to fight on the side of Britain in both world wars, at a time when many Afrikaners still sided with the Germans. All of this contributed in no small measure to the United Party under Smuts's leadership losing to the National Party in 1948, paving the way for the new apartheid laws. Part of the reason for what became apartheid was to keep all of the tribes separate from each other, and this was an attempt to stop the constant tribal warfare and the bloodshed, and so they created homelands. Also, the government wished to slowly educate the tribes up to the same standards as the white people. Now, everyone admits now that apartheid was a mistake because it was what led to the formation of the ANC, a socialist Marxist group. The myth that there was never democracy in South Africa is linked to a second myth. One, most people think that they know that apartheid was an invention of the Afrikaners and their belief that South Africa should be ruled exclusively by whites. And two, it is usually thought that the English tradition in South Africa was non-racial and democratic. In fact, the British tradition, as purveyed by both English-speaking South Africans and the Parliament at Westminster, has played a less than glorious role in establishing democracy in the region. It was two renowned Englishmen, Cecil Rhodes and Winston Churchill, who at crucial moments planted the seeds that were to ripen into policies which deprived black people of most democratic rights in South Africa. A third, Jan Smuts, an Afrikaner by birth, who became a committed supporter of the British Empire, was also an architect of laws which were later to become the framework of apartheid. Like Churchill, Smuts has a statue in Parliament Square here in London, but in South Africa, both will go down as men who destroyed, rather than built, democracy in the country. Africans were to have no say in the election of a national government, although initially they did retain their voting rights in the Cape Parliament. An old article from 2001, which is written by a black journalist named Rusili Shabalala, mentions some of the statistics of deaths during the apartheid years and thereafter. At the start of the year 1900, the number of Africans in South Africa was found to be only 3.5 million people. That was according to the British colonial government census, and those were very, very exact the way they did them. By 1954, the African population had soared to 8.5 million, and by 1990, there were more than 35 million black people, all carefully managed, closely policed, counted, and shunted around in the homelands and townships. During apartheid, the black population grew apace, however, because now they also had the benefit of the Boers' medical knowledge, along with the excellent agricultural skills which were brought into the country. The population growth and black average life expectancy in fact showed that the Africans in South Africa under apartheid were in a better than average health when compared to other Africans on the rest of the continent. In the decades prior to the official policy of apartheid, which was officially read into law in 1948, the average life expectancy of South Africans was only 38 years. However, during the last decades of apartheid era, from 1948 to 1994, the average life expectancy for black people had risen to 64 years, on a par with Europe's average life expectancy. Moreover, the black infant death rates had by then also been reduced from 174 to 55 infant deaths per 1,000, and this was higher than here in Britain and Europe. Let us briefly visit the deaths due to political violence during apartheid. Of those deaths, the vast majority, 92%, were primarily due to Africans killing Africans, such as the intertribal battles for territory and the ensuing violence caused by Nelson Saint Mandela inciting it, and the necklacing that his charming wife, Winnie Mandela, introduced to punish black women in affairs with white men, to silence her enemies and any suspected government informants. The security forces itself caused a whole 518 deaths. That's 5.6% during the same period. Post-apartheid. Violent deaths from 1994 to 2000. The South African police reports in 2000 stated that a total of more than 174,220 people died from violent deaths from crime-related violence between 94 and the year 2000. So my question is this. Did apartheid ever kill as many Africans as are now being killed by the deliberate neglect and looting of tax funds by the current, supposedly democratic ANC regime? To put this into perspective, in 44 years of apartheid, 18,700 people were killed in politically related violence. This included soldiers, police, terrorists, civilians, necklace murders, rioters, all victims. However, after Mandela became president in 94, an average of 25,000 people were murdered every year. Well over 67,000 white people have been murdered in South Africa since 1994. And more than 3,000 of these people are farmers, the people who are feeding you. Genocide Watch is warning that South Africa is already in the genocide process stage of 7, targeting white Afrikaners for extinction. One of the many to benefit from a good education, supplied courtesy of the white people, Nelson Mandela took full advantage of the system that was offered freely to the black people, a system paid for by the white taxes. They also had free housing, free medication, free hospitals, free university places, whilst any white people who wanted to go to varsity had to pay. The schools that were built with white taxes. Nelson Mandela took advantage of the free university placements, and using white money, he studied and became a lawyer, as many others did as well. They became doctors and professional people in fairly prominent placings around the country, despite apartheid. Strange then, that whilst this was good enough for him to do for himself, Mandela did not feel that it was good enough for his own people. And he began inciting hatred and violence against the very people who had educated and helped him. Mandela now decided that white given education was demonic and that his people should not take it. He began inciting the burning down of schools and other educational buildings. Now, every time a school was burned down, the white people would rebuild them. That's more wasted taxes, only to see these schools burned down again. But they persevered, rebuilding schools, building housing, supplying medical care at all times. Nelson Mandela was directly responsible for the deaths of well over 100 people between 1976 and 1984, inciting and carrying out many bomb attacks on shopping centers, always targeting only civilians. Had Nelson Mandela been sentenced in Britain or America in 1964 when his sentence was passed, he would have been hung or electrocuted. Just prior to Mandela's release, he was asked repeatedly to please publicly renounce violence, and he refused, saying that violence to gain what he wanted, even at the cost of life and limb, was completely acceptable, even when it was his own people who were dying. Under Nelson Mandela's term as president, more than 100,000 people have been murdered. Nelson Mandela has stood arm in arm with other people, other black people, to sing about the killing of white people many times. This was the man who took the country that became called the Rainbow Nation from a first world country with some of the best medical centers in the world, and introduced its mostly law-abiding people to the savagery of might is right, which is an African way of life. The murders that have been covered up began to happen more often, and for some reason, because of the sad belief in the new ruling party that food comes from the supermarket, They began killing farmers, especially en masse. And we now have a party that is controlling the country, controlling medicine, education, and growth, that believe raping a baby, a virgin baby, is going to cure AIDS. The presidents after Mandela stepped down as savior of the country have all been very involved in the singing and the condemnation of the white race, and how it gives them the right to the untamed violence that has ensued. Even whilst starvation rates climbed, people were being evicted because they could no longer afford their homes, and the minority was still expected to fund the growing corruption in the ANC government. So many promises were made, and none of these promises have been kept. For some reason, the blacks almost all believe the lie that they've been fed, that simply by being there, they have more right to the land than those who bled, worked, and died to make the land produce, to support the very people who are now freely able to murder white people with seeming impunity. The reports that manage to get out of the country are extremely frightening and always played down or completely ignored, especially when you see what is being done to women and children. No one is exempt from the savagery being practiced upon a people who have nowhere to go. They are refused entry into other countries. No one wants them. Just like in the last World War, no one, no country would give shelter to the Jews fleeing the Germans. So it seems that a genocide is now condoned all over again. Is this to become another case of, if only we had fill in the blank? After the last World War, General Patton said, please let us avoid this ever happening again. Well, how about let's stop it now? It doesn't, we don't want this to continue to happen. We're supposed to be in the 21st century, not the 16th century. And instead of this, we're finding the Prime Minister of Britain happy to, oh my God, I actually want to puke when I think of it, go to South Africa and then embarrass Britain with that hideous display she called dancing, and then throwing more money at yet another corrupt government who has already used previous funds that were sent by Britain for research into AIDS that were used to build up President Zuma's home and to give his cronies huge salary increases. None of this money ever filters to the people who need it. With the latest laws, white people are no longer allowed to be employed. It is actually a criminal offense, punishable with a jail sentence to do so. They are not allowed to get any financial help from the government for children's homes, and more of them are doomed to having to live in these shanty towns. The only people helping whites in South Africa are other white South Africans who realize that they've got to get over their differences in languages and start to work as teams. Now, I cannot speak much about what is happening there right now because I'm living in England now and I'm safe, sort of. However, this is why I've asked these people to please join me. So I would like us to welcome the founder of the South African Family Relief Project, opening her farm up to help people, Lee Oxley Dupree. Karen Smith, who is an award-winning broadcaster from Radio Free South Africa, over in America, mind you. And we would also like to welcome author Kewan Elgin, who is the author of Bulala, A True Story of South Africa. He has done his own research, going more than 25,000 miles, plowing across Africa, Southern Africa, again and again, to find the truth. If anybody would like to join us, please, you are free to tell us now that you wish to join us, and we will invite you in so that you can speak to them and ask them questions. Anybody who's interested, the page that's up now, if you can see it, there is a PayPal and a First National Bank thing for transfers. If you can give money to the South African Family Relief Project to help these people, it would be truly appreciated. Can you imagine living in a tin shanty? In summer, you cook your eggs on it. In winter, you freeze to death. Anyway, guys, over to all of you. Let's see who's interested in joining us. So, anyone interested in joining us? What's that? Mandela was seen as, yes. Oh, thank you. Yeah, Mandela's been seen as a hero in many countries who believe the lies. Mandela himself even actually admits that he was asked to rewrite his book to be more friendly to the nationalities. So his book is not the original version of his book. You know, and it's just absolutely appalling. Kieran, tell us a little bit about your book.
Well, it's South Africa's entire history, really, in a nutshell, all our recorded history, because the indigenous folk, which you mentioned, they were originally separated into two distinct groups: the Khoi, which means men of men, and the Khoisan, which means men who have nothing, who were hunter-gatherers, whereas the Khoi were more better off in terms of the fact that they had cattle, etc. But they had no written language, so there's only the oral tradition in terms of their history. But the early explorers were pretty meticulous in their record keeping and in their observations. And so we have a pretty good idea of what the place looked like from about the late 1400s, when the Portuguese explorers first came. And then there was a bit of a gap, and then the Dutch settlers came in the mid-1600s, and they were excellent record keepers, and we have a very clear picture of how things were there in those days, and where the various tribes were, which areas were uninhabited, what their levels of development were, etc. So I've picked it up there, essentially where the Portuguese explorers arrived, and taken it all the way through to Mandela. It's just under 400 pages. I'll show you what it looks like. There it is. It's Bulala, which is a Zulu word. It means kill or
I was
destroy.
wondering what Bulala meant.
I'll explain why. It might seem an odd title, but oddly enough, the very last line in the book is Bulala Amabunu, which means kill the Boers. And just recently, I'll hold another book up. Look what we've got, Kill the Boer, which is a book being put out just about a month ago, with all the statistics and the facts and the figures behind what's going on in South Africa in terms of the ethnic cleansing of the whites. But I've tried to cover 500 years of history in just under 400 pages. So it gallops along at quite a pace. It never gets boring. I've put it in novel form in the tradition of, let's say, Mishnah, where he explored the South African history from the perspective of a story, the human story. And I was quite inspired by his book, The Covenant, which I read many years ago. And I do reference it in my book and many, many others. And I've put together a rollicking ride through our history. So it never gets boring. The human story is there of the ordinary folk, and of course of the heroes that we've all heard of: Cecil John Rhodes, Jan Smuts, Paul Kruger, many English gentry who got involved in our history here. So there's many countries that pulled in. Americans came over here. They volunteered to fight on the side of the Boers during the Second Anglo-Boer War. We had Canadians here. We had Australians here, New Zealanders here, Scandinavians, Russians, Germans, you name it. And many stayed, and they make up the South Africans of today. Our lingua franca, so to speak, is Afrikaans, which is a
Typically South African problem. It'll come right.
It'll come right for a second. Bob, is Bob still here? Bob says that they want to come to the country for unfarmed farmland. No.
I'm a typical South African. And I know our history from the perspective of someone who's traveled the country extensively. Most of my life been involved in tourism development. So I got to see the country well. But when I came to write the book, I made sure I went. Hello? Hello?
Oh, what's that? That went weird.
You're coming.
Okay. Are we back? All right.
Yeah.
So I made sure I went to every battlefield mentioned in the book to ensure that the descriptions, the physical descriptions, are accurate. Every town mentioned in the book, many of whose names have now been changed. Names that we grew up with are gone. They've been replaced with African names. Although, you know, we talk of Africans, we are Africans. We're a white tribe in a sense. We've been here 360 odd years. We've been farming the land as long as the farmers in the United States have been farming the land there. In fact, Cape Town is 1 year older than New York. It was founded by the same people. New York was originally New Amsterdam, founded by the Dutch, and Cape Town was Kaapstad, founded by the Dutch. There was a Dutch West Indies Company. Here we had the East Indies Company, the big corporates of the day. We're going back to the mid 1600s, and that's our contribution. We built the place from a wilderness with wandering nomads to a first world powerhouse, a nuclear power. We were at one stage, which is now changed.
Oh, not right now. After I'm finished here, in an hour.
Oh, we've got Vanna and Anna have joined us. Would you guys like to ask any questions?
Yes, I would like to ask a question. Can you hear me?
Yes.
You were talking about Nelson Mandela. For me, it's hard to follow English because I'm Dutch, but I try. Are you? Yeah, I didn't understand if you were a fan of Nelson Mandela.
No.
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 No, then I got that right.
Yeah, he's no saint. He is definitely no saint. He's the very epitome of evil.
Yes.
When you look at what his wife did, his wife even had children murdered.
Okay, Stompy.
Yeah, Stompy. She had him killed.
Yeah. No, but what I was trying to say and to ask, here in Holland, he was seen as a hero.
Yeah, here in the UK as well. There's a statue to this disgusting man.
Uh-huh.
Yes, but what I thought the first time about he was getting out of prison and becoming a president, and I believe he was promising black people in South Africa free houses and whatever.
Yeah, those
I thought by myself, there is a big mistake. That's not going to end well.
No.
That was the first thought that came in my mind. And I'm so sorry for you people. I've been in South Africa, in the Kingdom Lesotho. But my question is, how can you reverse it that Nelson Mandela will not be seen as a hero, but as I think of him as a evil man.
He was a terrorist.
Hello?
Karen, what did you say? As a criminal. He is a criminal. He's a terrorist.
Yes, because he was in the ANC and he did many bad things, I know.
When he was asked about the whole socialist thing, he was so arpay about it. It's like, yeah, well, so what? He was never interested in his own people. If he had been interested in his own people, he would not have condoned the amount of deaths that his own people have suffered.
Anna, it's Anna, is it?
Yes, that's Anna.
Anna, something that most people don't know is that in the early 1960s, when Nelson Mandela was undergoing a criminal trial for terrorism and sabotage, the organization Amnesty International, which is a pretty liberal organization, was approached to take up his cause. And they made it quite clear that they were not interested because, as they said, he has been convicted of many violent crimes. He's received a fair trial and a fair sentence. So that was then, and that was soon forgotten. And he was a communist, of course. He was a high-ranking communist, and the communist propaganda machine kicked in. And for the next 40 years, the 27 that he was in jail, and then during his lifetime, and he passed away a couple of years ago, he was put forward as a hero. And yes, he was an interesting man, and he was the man for his time. And many say that he stopped what could have been a bloody civil war. But from a different perspective, we're getting now what we would have had 25 years ago. It's coming now. So it was really just delayed the whole process. But he was found guilty on many counts. He admitted them. In his eloquent closing argument, he said he admitted his guilt, and he said he's prepared to die if necessary for it. So, he had some redeeming factors, shall we say. But as one of the people being interviewed tonight rightly said, he was offered his freedom in the early 80s by the then President P.W. Botha, as long as he came out against violence and that he would be in favor of a democratic solution to the country's political problems. He refused to renounce violence, and he was approached again, because he was then told, well, then you'll have to sit in jail. He was approached again by the next president, who was F.W. de Klerk, and again offered his freedom so long as he renounced violence. Once again, he refused to. And F.W. de Klerk, in his own words, had no choice. The pressure of the world was such. There were free Mandela concerts all over the world. There was economic sanctions against South Africa. He had no choice, he said, but to release him, which he did. So, as someone else pointed out, if he had been convicted of what he was convicted in virtually any Western country at that time, he would have been executed. If he'd been convicted in any African country, he would definitely have been put up against a wall and shot. But in fact, he was shown clemency by his captors. He was well treated. He was never tortured. He spent the first part of his sentence on Robben Island, which is not exactly a holiday camp, but it's got a lovely view of Cape Town. And the second part...
Oh, he got stuck again.
Yeah, I can't hear him anymore.
Yeah, he got stuck again.
Yeah, the signal in South Africa is bad.
Yeah, it's terrible that this is what they are having to put up with in South Africa. They have something now called...
certainly popular amongst most of the black folk.
I just don't understand how they can't see what he did. Because the whole thing of keeping the masses ignorant is how you organize cannon fodder. Because if people don't have the education to see what you're doing, and they're too stupid to understand that you are actually keeping them ignorant so that you can use them as fodder, like, just go and fight this for me. It's okay if you die. I don't care. Surely people should realize it. It's absolutely horrendous. Vanna, can you hear? Try speaking.
Hello, hello.
Yes, we heard you.
The dogs. Hi,
Yes.
everybody.
Hi, Vanna. Is there any questions you'd like to ask?
At the moment, I'm just actually very happy to listen to everyone, and I love your introduction. I'm actually a Hungarian that has been living in South Africa for 20 years. And my husband is Afrikaans. And we have 2 sons who are now 18 and 19, going to university. It's a huge shock that is going on. And so I'm just trying to listen to everybody that is searching for the truth, to see how to uncover everything first and then how to try to proceed solving it. So I'm looking forward to everybody here on the panel to tell more about all the things you are doing.
Yeah. Kuran, is there any way you think this can be reversed now, or does it have to run its course?
Well, I think Pandora's box has been opened and exacerbated by the current president, Cyril Ramaphosa, who only came in about 6 months ago. The first major speech he made in Parliament, he said, we are going to take the land and give it to our people, or give it back to our people. And of course, our people meant not the whites. So these created huge expectations amongst the common black folk, and immediately there were land invasions, and the temperature's really gone up now. The expectations are high. There's blatant anti-white hate speech like we've never seen in this country. We've never seen it as it is now. The tension between the races is higher than it's ever been, I believe, and certainly it's hotting up. But to answer your question, this is a tough continent, and we've been here 360 odd years. We're not just going to go away. There's quite a strong move in the Cape for secession. The Khoi people, the descendants of the original, the real original inhabitants, the Aboriginal. They are what we call the coloured folk now, or they call themselves that, the coloured folk.
Yeah.
They don't speak Black African languages. They speak Afrikaans. They identify more with the white folks' culture than with the black, and they've been pushing quite hard for secession. They have appointed a king, or a king has risen, you could say, King Cornelius, and some support has rallied behind him. So there's quite a strong move in the Cape.
Hang on, just let him get back to us.
Yeah, welcome to the Rainbow Nation.
First world country.
The communists have never stood for election here, but they've always controlled things in the background. So we have a strong movement now in the Cape to break away from the central government. They won't be happy about that, I'm sure. But that seems to be the only real solution, is that those who don't want to be ruled by the ANC but are not able to vote themselves away, because we are such a minority. The whites are less than 10%, coloureds are roughly about the same, and they tend to vote together. So together they don't make up more than about 20% of the electorate. So 80%, which is essentially the ANC and the more radical Marxist parties, will vote for a unitary state and a fully fledged communist state, where the state owns all the land, they already own all the minerals, etc. And the talk is that they now want to expropriate, more like steal, all the property belonging to the whites, and without compensation. And they somehow believe that this is the right way to go. It is, of course, a Zimbabwe scenario, but there's always hope.
And the thing is, they're not keeping the land. They're selling the land off to the Chinese. So do they honestly think that the Chinese are going to say, no, it's not a problem, we don't mind you guys doing your own thing on that land? The Chinese will remove them from the land.
And if you still owe a bond on that land, you still have to repay it.
Yes, according to the bank.
So even though you've been removed from the property, you still have to pay for the property.
Yes. So banks don't lose at all. That was what they came out.
Even though you've been kicked off?
Yes. Without compensation. I mean, that is the important bit here. Take it away without compensation, but the banks lose nothing, because as far as they're concerned, you signed the mortgage, you pay it, whether you are still on the property or not.
But what can they do to you if you refuse to pay it? I mean, say, sorry, it's not my property anymore, speak to the government.
Well, if you have any property whatsoever, whatsoever left. If you have like that, they send the sheriff to take it away. Yeah. So it's a no-win situation for the white people, I'm afraid. Yes, there has been some areas of the world, but the problem is that people like Theresa May, Belgium, and the Chinese have come out all in favor of this. They agree
Well,
with
the
this
Chinese would be,
expropriation.
wouldn't they?
Yeah, of course, because the
they're
mineral
trying
rights.
to gain. They want to
Yep.
gain from this. You know, people need to wake up. I mean, none of this is being done with the intent of being sweet to the people. It's been done because the Chinese want more land. They've already got way too much. That was embarrassing, Bub. Honestly, that was the most embarrassing thing I've ever seen. I have 2 left feet and I can dance better than her.
Oh no, that was.
And then she repeated this when she went to Nigeria.
Yes.
Where
Repeat
they
performance.
look down on women in Nigeria. They think women are like second-class animals.
Yeah.
You know, so it's just so sad, and there must be a way. And this is why I was, when I was offered the chance to do the show, to try and start bringing the whole South African thing to the fore. I was actually glad I was given the chance, and I'm hoping that we can actually set up another one, and then try and get Kuan to come back. There's a Pastor Hammond who actually has met with Mandela. We'll get him into this as well. We can get the singer guy. I can't think of his name again.
Steve
Steve Hofmeyer. Yeah. All these people who have gone into the country, who have been in the country where they were friends with black people. I mean, my father spoke Zulu fluently, and so did my grandmother. And she was friends with witch doctors and things like that, with people like that. The witch doctor who wrote an African book called Indaba My Children, my gran was given the very first copy of that book by the witch doctor as a friend.
It was Credo Mutwa.
Yeah.
Yes, I love it.
He gave the very first copy of Indaba My Children to her. And that is, in a way, if you read it, it's their version of a Bible. And it talks, even that book talks of how they came down from the north and how they were chased by the slavers. And the slavers were Muslims, because one of the girls in one of them, she gets syphilis from it and she gives it back to them and passes it all the way back up Africa. You know, it's absolutely horrendous when you read what they do to their own people. It's sad. It really is sad. And they have no respect for life. It's an African, the whole of Africa, every African tribe that has taken their country back, might is right.
Fail.
That's the thing, you know, and if they've got more people than you, they win.
Yeah.
Or they believe they win. They'll just carry on running over you like lemmings until they drown you in the dead bodies.
But what do they get left with, Rowena?
Nothing.
They get left with barren, unproductive
Land.
deserts. And that's I really don't like saying this, but they don't seem to have a concept of cause and effect. Don't seem to have a concept of cause and effect. Don't seem to have a concept of cause and effect.
Jeff? Jeff, can you try and mute your video that you're watching in Right Unity? If you click on the button there, it will mute that video and it will not echo back through all the time. Then we can let you speak again. because Jason said he muted you because of the echo back.
Yeah, I just went round and round and round.
Yes, it is continuing going round and round.
If we can touch on Theresa May's visit again, other than her abysmal dancing, but what she did say, which disturbed many of us, is she said that her government is in fact.
Let's wait for him to come back. Oh, I see Bob asked a question. Karen, can you
I'm
read?
giving the answer now. Wait, I am.
Okay,
Now I
yeah.
see.
That is, it's a problem that she said that, because one of the pillars of Western society is land ownership, property ownership, and the protection of your rights in terms of that.
She was, can you repeat what you said, because you cut out? It was something to do with her agreeing to the land expropriation.
Yes, she said that her government is in favor of land redistribution so long as it's done legally. Well, unfortunately, in the South African context, all that would mean is that the ANC obtains a 2/3 majority in Parliament, which they're likely to do in terms of the bill. They change the constitution, and then the land expropriation without compensation is done legally. So unfortunately, it would be legalizing theft. And property ownership and property rights are one of the pillars of Western civilization. So to remove that, it would be catastrophic. So it's unfortunate she said that, because it would just be legalizing theft.
Yeah, well, this
Yes.
is what I kind of felt it would do. I mean, how do you legally steal somebody else's land?
Hello.
And hi, Jeff.
Hello. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, that's wonderful. I'm sorry about that. I don't know what went wrong. More than likely it is me, because I do make mistakes.
Not a problem, Jeff.
Yeah. And is it possible for me to ask a question to clear up something before I ask a real question?
Of course you can.
Right. Now, are I to assume that we are talking about the atrocities against the white people?
Yes.
Right. Okay. Now, that is fine. Right. Now, what I'd like to say to you is I know people who has got a lemon farm in South Africa where I've been, and it is quite a big place, actually. They also have a lot of coloured ladies working there who were made homeless, but they've gone there as a sanctuary. Now, going back to the atrocities that are being committed, if that lemon farm is attacked, which is owned by a white man from Llanelli in South Wales, and they commit these atrocities, does that mean that they commit the atrocities against the coloured people as well as the white man?
Yeah.
I beg your pardon?
Yes.
You said yes?
Yes. They would. Anybody who is there is culpable. They feel that if you are there, you are part of the problem, and so they will kill you as well.
But even if you are of their nationality?
Yes.
Good
That's
gracious.
the horrific thing. There's been cases where look, when we call someone coloured, it's a mixed race person, and the people in South Africa who are mixed race call themselves coloured and are so proud of the word coloured that they do not feel it is an insult to be called coloured. Overseas here, yes, people would be upset about it. And there's been cases where the maid, where, say, a white family has a black maid, they have gone in, and I remember this case. There were 2 children. The maid fought them off. They took the maid, and after they'd killed the children and hung the children up with the washing line,
Good God.
They raped the maid and then did the same thing to her because she had dared to try and protect a child. She was a causa. That was their own person they were doing it to, their own race of people.
That is absolutely disgusting.
She was seen as the character.
There's pictures that have you can, if you're lucky, you can get out of the country, where they have taken a child and actually smashed its head flat and squished it out like a plate on the road.
Good God, right.
It's absolutely sickened. And that one picture that I showed of, yes, he was a terrible man in many ways. I've gone blank. AWB.
Eugene Terblanche.
Yeah, Eugene Terblanche. But no man, no person deserves to die in the manner in which he was murdered.
Yeah.
That is absolutely. How long has this been going on?
24 years. Since
24.
1994.
Well, I was there in 1986.
Yeah,
And
that was still when the country was under white rule.
Yeah.
The Baragwanath Hospital in the Transvaal was the top eye hospital in the entire world. They had the best surgeons, the best nurses, the best of every single thing. It was the largest hospital in the world. And today, Lee, what does Baragwanath Hospital look like?
It's a rubbish dump. It is so bad. It's filthy. It is. You do not go in there because you might contract some strange disease that you will never be cured from. It is really, really bad.
I think that is absolutely terrible what I've just heard. The gentleman that wrote the book, who is there, I'm looking at him now.
Yes.
May I ask him a question? On the books that you've written, I should imagine, well, I don't imagine, I got to accept the fact that you're dead accurate. But with your practical experience, do you think there is going to be a change going the other way? Do you think this will stop?
Jeffrey, I think you're of the generation that will probably remember the Mau Mau emergency.
Yes, correct, quite correct.
Kenya. Well, there's a lot of parallels. We have a radical Marxist group here called the EFF, the Economic Freedom Fighters, and they're led by a radical Marxist called Julius Malema. Well, their modus operandi is textbook Mau Mau, the maiming of the farm animals. We know that they are behind a lot of the attacks on the farms, and they use terror tactics. They are vicious. They're uncompromising. They blatantly say they want the whites gone one way or another. So in the same way that the British eventually defeated the Mau Mau in Kenya, they eventually defeated the Mau Mau, the British, by using the middle class. The Kikuyu tribe, the same tribe that constituted most of the Mau Mau, they had their landowners, their business owners, their chiefs, their traditionalists, the tai, as they call them, those who wore ties, the educated ones. And the British very cleverly used the middle class Kikuyu to defeat the Mau Mau, because the middle class has got the most to lose.
This is going to be very, very interesting to follow, because I think what I have just heard said by various people on the show tonight, I think is atrocious. And I'm going to be quite truthful and honest with you. I am absolutely disgusted with our own Prime Minister, Theresa May.
So we do hope that the black middle class will see sense. They make up quite a big voting bloc, and we do hope that they will be the bulwark against the radicals. The white electorate is essentially youth. We are not a factor anymore, really. The whites are less than 10% of the population now. So politically, we can have very little say. But in terms of the black middle class, the ever-growing black middle class, there is hope. They are becoming more educated, more aware, and they have seen through the promises of the ANC, the hollow promises that you will always get from communists, which haven't been delivered on. So to answer your question, it can go the other way. But we have to hope and pray and appeal to the good folk of this country, and there are many, both black and white, to pull together and resist this communist takeover.
It would be very interesting at a later date to get an update on this, because I think
That we
this
want to do
program,
another show.
that
We
this
would like to
program
learn
is
about it.
well worth listening to, watching, and try to debate, if possible, by more than one or two individuals. I am really took back to think that all this is happening. I'm quite aware things are going on wrongly in the world today, but by what you just said, that I think it is terrible. And when children are involved and are killing their own people because they are in a sanctuary for protection, I cannot find words to express my true feelings about it. Anyway, thank you, my friend, for letting me come on.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
I think things do have to be said, maybe in a different way from one another, but it is the only way you're going to get the truth, aren't you?
Yeah. Jeffrey, you see
Yes,
the picture that I've got linked up now?
Yes, I do.
If you have a look at the top left hand, that man, the picture next to the picture, the two pictures together,
Yes.
that was Eugene Terreblanche, and that was what he looked like when they found him.
Good.
Oh my God.
God, that is terrible.
They ripped his beard out.
God.
They literally beat him until he was a pulp. The little girl down at the bottom, she was 9. She watched them rape her parents. According to the footage that they got, she was tied up with barbed wire. They made her watch while they raped her parents and tortured and murdered them.
God.
And it took them 4 hours before they got to her. Then they raped her to death.
God almighty.
A little 9-year-old child. The woman above was tortured. She was tortured. They peeled the skin off her back.
God.
After raping her many times. A group of maybe 5 guys raped her to death.
God almighty.
This is what South African white people are having to put up with. And you can see the survivors. They still try to keep their lack of finger, because his finger's been chopped off. The woman was raped and then hung upside down and disemboweled and left to bleed out. When she was hung, she was still alive with her guts oozing out.
Good gracious me.
And I know that these are disgusting pictures to see.
How did you manage to get these pictures?
A lot of the research, it wasn't that easy to get them.
I should imagine it wouldn't be, especially with that lady hanging upside down.
You know, and I mean, that's a 4-year-old little boy. They take the animals, and they're not even killing the animals to eat. All they do is, with the cattle, they will cut their hamstrings and leave them to die. They will skin the sheep alive and leave them in the field.
God, dear.
It's absolutely hideous what you're seeing them do to people. The lady at the end there with the black gentleman behind her.
Yeah.
She's not a white lady. She's a colored lady, a mixed race lady. She was beaten up and almost kicked to death by them.
Good God alive.
For having the cheek to be a mixed race and not a pure breed.
Oh, dear.
This is what Mandela's legacy really is. Not what people are claiming, the rainbow nation that he said he made. This is Nelson Mandela's true legacy.
How the devil can I answer to anything that you have said, though, when I'm not there to know for myself? I've got to accept what you're saying is true, and I won't believe no other. Seeing is believing, as they say, and you people from that country, you know. So,
I mean, that's why I think people need to try and get hold of Kuan's book.
Yeah.
And buy that book and read it, because he has done so much research. He has done intricate research into the subject he is covering. And whilst I think, Kuan, you wrote it as a story, it's still history, isn't it?
Yeah.
It is indeed. It's written in novel form to make it more readable, but the facts are all there, the references are all there. But it never gets boring. It never bogs down into dry old history. That's the one That's the one. And it's available on Amazon. It's rated 5 stars on Amazon. It's doing very well. And it's our history in a nutshell, from the early explorers right through to Mandela.
Is this these atrocities more prominent in some states in Africa, or is it all over?
I think the whole of Africa has become like this, but Southern Africa, they won't even allow other black races to come in now. They kill off anybody who comes from Nigeria down to Southern Africa. For years prior to apartheid, we had people coming to South Africa. The black people from Nigeria, Kenya, and other northern countries wanted to get into Southern Africa because they were safe.
Is it safe for tourists to go to Africa?
No.
No. This last week, 3 countries have issued travel warnings about South Africa, one of them being the USA, that it is an extremely dangerous country to go to. Now, why they didn't issue them before, I can't even begin to imagine.
And
But
yet all Prime Minister of the UK has not said a thing about this.
But your country is one of the countries that has issued the travel warning. So although she went there and danced her little dance and promised money, more money, your country now issued a travel warning that it's a very dangerous country to go to. But we're going to give them billions anyway. It doesn't make sense. But
if I could come in there, we still do get a lot of tourism. There are dangerous areas, but if one goes with a guide, it's no more dangerous really than any other African country. If you end up in the wrong place at the wrong time, yes, certainly you can get yourself into trouble. But we still do have a lot of tourism, and with the rand currency having flopped through the floor, it's actually...
Oops. Let's just wait for him to get back. I know the rand is at an abysmal all-time low right now. But to think that people are having to live like that in this day and age.
If you come be prepared only to go to those places which are recommended as safe, you can still have a great time. So I wouldn't want to put off tourists, except with the caution, as some countries have put out, that it can be dangerous. So it's better to travel with a guide, a local guide who knows the country, and then you can have a great holiday. And it's a beautiful country. It's a vibrant country. If we disregard the criminals and the Marxist politicians who are always trying to stir up race hatred, if we can disregard them, you'll find the rest of the South Africans, which is the vast majority, very friendly and open people and outspoken people and welcoming people. So I wouldn't write it off as a tourist destination quite yet.
No.
I think you have to just know that if you go there, you need to take care. Don't go places alone. Always go in groups of people.
If I may want to ask one more question, because I know we're getting short of time now.
Oh, well, apparently we can carry on as long as people want to talk.
All right. Just one question, then I will close my case, if I put it that way. What is the position with the state of Zulus? Are they the same type of people as what we're talking about?
Well, the last president, Jacob Zuma, who thankfully has been replaced, although we were kind of out of the frying pan into the fire, but he was a Zulu, a traditional Zulu. Mandela, famous Mandela, was a Xhosa, who are generally tribal rivals to the Zulu. The Zulu is the most populous tribe, and they were always the dominant tribe. The Marshall states, they gave Britain a pretty tough time in the Zulu Wars, as you probably know. Yeah, so they are still traditionalists. They are warlike people. They don't take kindly to being told what to do by other tribes. So there's still a chance that tribalism will rear its ugly head again, and that KwaZulu-Natal or Zululand will flare up again. There's always a lot of infighting there between the various clans and various warlords. So they're still a warlike people. But and they are the biggest tribe, as I mentioned. So they're definitely a major factor in this country politically, and there's always the chance that they will break away and not take orders from the ANC because they've kind of lost their grip on it. So yeah, keep an eye on them.
Yeah, I went to the Zulu reservation while I was there, and I was a bit embarrassed and shocked. I didn't know what was happening. As soon as I got there and I had my photograph taken with the big chief, they all bowed to me. And I thought, whatever's going on? And it's because I've got white hair, they call me a Palomino.
Well,
what does that mean to them?
They do respect elders. They are still pretty much traditionalists, and they are strong people in the sense that they respect strength. They respect wisdom and they respect strength. They have no time for liberals. They consider them weak and divisive of their own people. So yeah, they are staunch people, and if you get on with them well, then they're great people. If you don't, then
Oh, he got stuck again. I think he will be back shortly. But it's a really good book. I think we should all try and get hold of it. So I know it's a bit difficult to get in Britain at the moment.
there's Rowena. So the British have got mixed memories, I think, of the Zulu. We find them interesting people, and they are a very cohesive people. They will generally stand together. So they could very well become a pivotal factor in South African politics in the future.
Sure. But one important thing that I found there with them, I got on well the short period of time I was there with them. They were marvelous, and they were all stood in a circle, and all of a sudden they were waiting, and they started stamping their feet, and the big chief who stood next to me and my daughter, we said to him, "What is happening?" They all of a sudden they stopped stamping their feet and dancing, and they waited for this lady to come out of the hut who had just within 2 minutes gave birth to a child, and they was waiting for her to come out. She came out and she carried on dancing with them. It was marvelous. I never experienced anything like it in my life. I thought, what a wonderful life they live.
At the Battle of Blood River, Kuan, am I right in this one? I remember my dad used to, we used to go down on the weekends because the Zulus would dance, and you could hear them from miles away.
Yeah, quite true.
And they said that at the Battle of Blood River, there were 20,000 black warriors, the Zulu warriors, and when they stamped, it was like the sound of thunder.
Yes,
And
true.
that was their fear tactic. They would do that to make people afraid, and it worked.
It certainly did. And they would clash their spears against their shields as well in unison, and shout Usutu, which was their royal house, like the Windsors, let's say. And they would charge in a battle formation, which they called the Horns of the Buffalo, with the experienced warriors in the middle and the younger warriors as the horns, which would encircle the enemy. But at Blood River, of course, they were utterly defeated. The armies estimated between 12 and 20,000 Zulus, and they attacked a laager, circled wagons of about 500 Boers. And the Boers had prayed for 7 days before the battle that they would get victory, sort of a Jericho scenario. And they utterly defeated the Zulus. But what is absolutely miraculous about the Battle of Blood River, 1838, is that the Boers did not lose a single man. Not a single man. There's been many one-sided battles in history, but this one was exceptional. And the Boers utterly defeated the Zulus without losing a single man. Quite astounding. But yes, there's quite an impressive monument there now, and every year Boers gather there to commemorate the battle. So do the Zulus every year, on the 16th of December, the Day of the Covenant, it's called.
Yeah. Didn't they try and take that away? Kuan,
Well, they changed it. They changed it to Day of Reconciliation. So some good intentions there, perhaps.
Jason asked, can your book be downloaded as an audio book or a Kindle version? It would be awesome if you can get that done.
Not yet. The publisher, it was published in the United States. The publisher wants to move the printed stock first, and then we would look at the e-copy. But it is available, and the best bet if one struggles to get it in a foreign country is to write directly to the publisher in the United States, and he will put.
He did say to me, if it's the guy I think I spoke to, that if I get a mass order, it works out to a lot less for people to actually get a copy of it. Let me find the. You cut out there, Kieran.
Sorry. Yes, if I could just repeat it. The book is available worldwide. If one can get it off Amazon, off eBay, there's many different sites. But the American publisher can get your book directly, and they're called Sacred Truth Publishing in the United States. And the book is Bulala, B-U-L-A-L-A. The other option is just to email him, which is on, if I can give the email address.
Yeah,
it's
you can.
STM, Sierra, Tango, STM, at Mounet, M-O-U-N-E-T, as in mountain, O-U-N, STM at Mounet, M-O-U-N-E-T.com. If you forget that or lose it, look up Sacred Truth. That's easy enough to remember. Sacred Truth Publishers, United States, and the book Bulala, B-U-L-A-L-A, and they will get one to you. But it can be.
I just found it on Take a Lot here in South Africa.
Yes, you can. Yes, indeed. There's also war books, www.warbooks.com. They will also, they're in South Africa, but they will happily dispatch one to you overseas, anywhere in the world.
W-A-R.
warbooks.com, yes, in South Africa.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, of course.
Do you think what's happening to the white people in South Africa is a reaction on apartheid or white racism against black people?
Can I answer that?
Yeah.
Anna, we've never seen such racism as we have now, and it's not from the white folk. I'm 61 years old. I lived right through the apartheid era, and I can assure you that South Africans got along pretty well despite what the rest of the world was hearing. We never had this blatant racism on the airwaves, on the radio. We just never had it before. This is a new thing. It might surprise people to hear that, but it is a new thing. And to answer your question, is it a reaction to apartheid? I think apartheid is being used as an excuse by radicals to create a civil war situation. Apartheid ended actually not when Mandela became president, but in the late 1980s. So that's over 30 years ago. You know, it is no longer an excuse. There's no reason at all to use that as a cudgel. We have had affirmative action for decades now. Whites are basically excluded from the corporate job market and from government jobs. So only blacks get those jobs. So there's absolutely no reason for anybody not to succeed in terms of your color here. There are very strong laws in place against racism. So no, I believe it is being an excuse that's being used by the Marxists to take over this country and turn it into a full-blown communist state. I don't believe it's apartheid is a factor. It's the generation who is now nearly 30 years old wasn't even born when Mandela was released, so they certainly didn't suffer from apartheid. And South African black folk have had the best standard of living in Africa always, even under apartheid, which only lasted 4 decades, 40 years, lasted 48 to 88. And communism lasted.
Oh dear. Karen, quick one while we're waiting for him to get back. I wanted you to talk about how you've got to train them up, otherwise you get penalized even further by.
Oh yes. So because of the affirmative action laws in South Africa now called broad-based black economic empowerment. They have strengthened the affirmative action laws, which everybody in the beginning in 1994, when they first came in, everybody thought that was relatively fair, to give them more, the black people, more access to the work market. But we did think there would be a sunset date on that. And we also think that, we thought that, but they broadened those laws. So now every single workplace has to conform to the dynamics of the country. In other words, it must be 80% black in your workplace, from top to bottom, from executive management down to the toilet and floor cleaners. Whether they are qualified for the job or not really doesn't matter. They have to be 80% black people. So the whites who were qualified and had been in the positions for a long time and were running the country as a first world successful country were paid off, and they had to leave and be replaced by black people. Now, you also had to give 51% of your business to a black partner. Give, not sell, and he didn't have to be an active partner or anything. You just had to give it to him. Now they're saying all businesses should be either nationalized, which is what the EFF, the Economic Freedom Fighters, are calling for, is the nationalization of everything. Now we've seen what happens when they do that, because South African Airways is state-owned, Eskom is state-owned, or quasi-state, or mostly state-owned. The media companies, SABC, is quasi-state-owned. They are disasters. The taxpayers had to pay billions in to keep these companies afloat. And now they want to nationalize everything. The stock exchange, I can't remember what they call it in South Africa. That issue the money. Kieran, could you help me out here?
The Reserve Bank?
Reserve Bank, yes. They want to nationalize or state control the Reserve Bank. They want to nationalize everything. And if we come back to where they're taking land away from the whites, they put out that 8% of black people own 72% of the land in South Africa. That is categorically not true. It has been surveyed that 8% of whites own 22% of the land in South Africa. A huge percentage is owned by the state. Why are they not taking that land, giving it to the landless black people who don't want the land in the first place? They want the money. They put a claim in on a farm, they get the farm given to them, and they try and sell it back to the white farmer because they don't want to work the land. They want the money. So all of this has excluded white people from the job market. There are no social grants for white people because once they've lost their home, their vehicle, and are living in a camp, they don't have a fixed address, so they can't even apply for grants if there were any coming that way. The businesses may not contribute to an all-white charity. Your charity has to be 80% for the blacks. So charities like Leave that deal with the white camps cannot get charitable contributions from businesses in South Africa. And that is why largely they depend on us from outside of South Africa to help them financially, because you can hardly go to a doctor or a hospital or a store and say, well, I'll give you all these old clothes and this old furniture if you'll just provide us with food for this camp. So they don't have finances. And these people are literally, we talk about the forgotten people of America that President Trump represents. These are the forgotten people. And we don't even have a correct estimate of how many there are. We estimate from the number of camps and the number of people that his organization helps, that is 1 million people. That is between 1/3 and 1/4 of the white population of South Africa are living in direst poverty, with no aid whatsoever. And that is why it's incumbent on us who are outside of the country to send
Try
as
and get the word
much
out.
money as we can to keep these people alive until we can find a permanent solution for them, because that is not happening right now. And I fear that we will wake up one day and say, where did the white people of South Africa go? Because they were eliminated literally in 48 hours. So, and they have a plan for that called Uhuru. Now, we need to help organizations, and Lee's one is the only one can any honesty recommend to help, because they do not take a penny for themselves. The money that goes to them goes where it's supposed to go. They feed people. And for me, the hardest thing for me is to imagine being Lee, who has to look into those children's eyes every single day of her life and tell them, I'm sorry, I can't feed you today. There is no food for you. I'm sorry, I can't take you to the dentist. There's no money for it. I'm sorry, I can't bring a doctor to you. There is no money for it. And every day of her life, this unsung hero has to face those decisions. Who do I feed today with the limited resources on hand? So it is incumbent on the rest of us to make sure that as many people as possible are fed every day. And that is why I do what I do, to try and keep them alive until we find an answer to the South African problem.
Well said.
You know, people ask us, why don't you leave? Well, there's no country in this entire world that is willing to take white refugees from South Africa. And the second part is, sorry, that these folks that are in the camps can hardly afford a loaf of bread, let alone a flight and a visa and all those kinds of things. So it is impossible for them to leave. The only thing that we can do is try and feed and clothe as best we can. But when you walk into a camp and you see a father that has a T behind his name, that have taught for 20 odd or 30 years, sitting in the dust with his hands in his head in his hands, crying, begging just for a daily job, even gardening, just so that he could feed his family. That is absolutely devastating to us. Having to choose, like Karen said, to tell a child, I'm sorry, I have to feed your baby brother first. We try and work like the babies get food first, then the little ones, then the older children, and then only we go to the teenagers, then mums and pregnant mothers, the elderly, and then the other folks. So we don't even get to the adults or to the teenagers. We are. The situation is so bad that we mostly stay at the babies and the little toddlers, because there's not enough to go around. And when I have to look into those little faces and see the desperation in the mothers, it's absolutely heartbreaking.
Yeah, Lee, I can't imagine what you go through today. You know, I sit here in America and I raise as much funds as I can for you. But I don't have to face that every day. I hear it secondhand and I feel the pain. I recently got over 1,000 emails. I sent out a call to white South Africans to please send me emails justifying why they should get refugee status here in the United States. Within 4 days, I had gotten over 1,000 emails. And I, who think I know what's happening in South Africa, my eyes were so swollen at the end of the second day from crying that I couldn't read anymore.
Read us some of
Stories
these.
are so heartbreaking, and every single white South African either has that story or has a neighbor or a relative who has the same story. And it broke my heart to read these emails. And I had to read every single one of them. And then we sent them to the immigrant. At the same time, Steve Hoffmeyer had a meeting at the American Embassy on the 14th in South Africa. And he asked me to send him those emails. So those 1,000 emails went twice to the politicians of America. And I can only say this. If they read even 1% of them, and they are not heartbroken by the situation for the whites in South Africa, then they are not human beings. Because I thought that I was kind of hardened to this because I look at it every day. And yet I still cry buckets because of the number of people affected by the violence, the murder, the lack of jobs, the helpless and hopeless feeling that these people have because they have no escape from their circumstances.
That's why when I was doing my speech, I said, this is another genocide. This is the Second World War, but it's going to be a lot worse.
Yes.
There'll be no gas chamber this time.
No, it's torture. Will be
This is going
tortured to death. 84-year-old grandmothers with holes drilled in their legs with electric drills and watched bleed out on the floor. Babies wrapped in newspaper and put in the oven to bake. This is what's happening. And the world is turning a blind eye. And people like myself who have been shouting for help for over 10 years are now devastated. The number of times I have wanted to give up this crusade because my soul is broken and I just can't look at any more torture and murder. But if I give up, who is going to do it? Who is going to do it in my place? So I beg of people to pay attention,
to
see
spread the word.
Spread the word and
get copies of this. We
help.
will do another show in a few weeks' time. I will ask full permission to get another show done. And we will try and get a lot more people who are big names as well, like Kuan, on here, who can tell you exactly what's happening and how we need the help. People in South Africa are desperate. Karen, you said you had a couple of emails you would read to us. Could you read us a couple of them?
I'm going to cry buckets here, but I have a couple of them. This is from people in South Africa, so I'm not going to mention names or anything. I'm just going to. Okay, so I write this in response to a posting on Facebook calling for white South Africans to get refugee status in the USA. I'm a white South African man, aged 56. I'm self-employed and own my own building company. Over the past 10 years, I have received fewer and fewer job contracts due to the affirmative action process. When potential customers realize the company is owned by a white male, they immediately reject the quotation as it doesn't meet their criteria. Subsequently, I have been forced to do small-scale jobs to cover expenses, which barely brings in enough to support myself and my wife. There are often times when I have no work for 3 weeks at a time. I have applied for numerous contracting positions with the larger contracting companies, but have been told outright that my age and demographic count against me. And I frequently work from home due to getting jobs out of town, forcing me to leave my wife alone at home for extended periods of time. I dread every time I get an out-of-town job, as I do not know if my wife will be safe while I am away. Despite having an electrified fence around our property, 5 large dogs, burglar-proofing on all windows, and an automated security system, I fear for her safety on a daily basis. My immediate family members have been victims of violent crimes on numerous occasions. My mother-in-law's house has been robbed. My mother was attacked in her home by 6. My sister has been robbed numerous times, and my father-in-law is held up at gunpoint numerous times for his vehicle. Because I am not given regular work, and quotations being rejected due to being a white male, I'm unable to save up to leave South Africa with my wife and start a new life in a country that is safer and where I will be able to work and support us. I'm seeking refugee status in another country for my wife and myself in the hopes of bettering our lives and being able to save and enjoy our retirement in peace without the threat of violence, discrimination, or extreme poverty. And that is only one of them. That is a heartfelt cry from white Africans, every one of them who has a story.
And they don't want to come to a country and go on the dole. Like
No,
to go on benefits. They want to come to the country and work for what they get.
Yes. This one is today literally we also live in fear of our own lives. It's almost a curse to be a white person living in South Africa. Daily we are threatened by you called you white scum. We are coming to rape your wives and your daughters. We have guns pointed at us and threats to stab or cut our throats. You get pushed off the roads and smacked in the face in the presence of the police that laugh at it. You're discriminated on just because of your skin color. Many of our women raped don't report it because nothing happens. And this is, I have more than 1,000 in that same vein. It is horrific. And I've reached the stage after 10 years of doing this that I just don't know what to do anymore.
It's heartbreaking to hear all this. Hello?
Yeah, I don't know what to say. It's worse than I even thought it was. And the sad thing is that people who are not yet finding themselves penalized by the whole thing, people who are still managing to get by, even though they're having to train up their replacements, they are still refusing to accept that there is a problem in the country and that they will end up being impacted by it at some stage. What is it going to take to get impacted by something? Is it going to take having your kids raped and murdered? Is it going to, we're already having that here in the UK and it's being washed under the bridge. What is it going to take for people to actually register? Hell, we need to wake up. Genocide can be practiced against white people as well as every other race. And this is the problem. And the white people in South Africa are having genocide practiced on them. And the rest of the world, the liberals, turn around and go, oh, well, they deserve it. How can you say a child, a baby, deserves to be raped to death? How can you say a baby deserves to have its brains smashed out across the floor?
It is in a terrible, terrible state, my dear. And what I seem to think, in the UK, everything that is happening, 99%, is all done by design. As regards to in South Africa, its actual practical experience is taking place over everything, isn't it?
It is. But it just feels the savagery of what is going down in South Africa is one step beyond sickening. I mean, Kieran, when you went across Southern Africa, going to all the memorials and that, and going to all the old buildings, did you meet with people and speak to them?
Very much so.
I've spoken to black people who say they wish apartheid was back.
Well, we set out to explore the country over a 6-month period. I'd known the country pretty well, having been in tourism all my life, but my wife hadn't seen it as much as I had. So we did a 6-month countrywide road trip, and I was actually looking to buy land. I've been in game management, wildlife management, and I looked at the best game farming area, which is what we consider the low veld as such. and 84% of that province turned out to be under land claims. This is 10 years ago. It hasn't changed. This is just an ongoing thing. We then went to the northern province, now called Limpopo, same again. And
that was because I thought Limpopo was part of Zimbabwe.
no, that it was northern province, now renamed Limpopo.
Did you go or meet up with that group of white folks who've set up a walled area, a whole town?
Orania.
Yeah. Have you spoken to them?
I've interviewed them a number of times on my show.
Not hearing about it. This was 10 years ago, and it's just got exponentially worse. Just to put it in perspective, there's roughly 30,000 white commercial farmers in South Africa. That's all. There's approximately 100 times that many in the United States, about 3 million. So if the estimates are about 3,000 of our commercial farmers have been murdered under the ANC's watch, that would extrapolate to 200,000 or 300,000 American farmers being murdered in the same period. I think there would be an absolute international outcry that one specific population group is being targeted. So the land question as well, the talk, many figures are bandied about of who owns what. But in the United States, 2% of the population own 90% of the farmland. That's quite normal in most Western countries, where a urban dweller might own a quarter of an acre, but a farmer will own many thousands of acres. So naturally, you can't say 50% of the population should own 50% of the land. It doesn't work like that. Not everybody's a farmer. So our figures are quite acceptable in terms of the number of commercial farmers owning the percentage of land. There's nothing wrong with it. In Scotland, for instance, 500 people own 50% of the country. These figures are, you could do what you like with them, as they say, lies, damn lies, and statistics. There's nothing skewed about the land ownership. Those who want to buy land in this country have for many decades been able to buy land. Nobody ever got land for free or stole land. It's a complete myth. And the Marxists are using it as the usual modus operandi, is to first attack the landowners because they control the food supply. So once you get them out the way, you control the food supply, then you control the people. Exactly the same thing happened in the Soviet Union, Russia, Russian Revolution, and then into the 30s. Zimbabwe, it happened. We just, unfortunately, the next domino. But we're a resilient people. We've been here for 3.5 centuries. We're not just going to go quietly into the night. We know what we built, what we earned, what we created, and we're going to see it through.
Yeah, that is a good way to be. I have friends that are still in South Africa that are from Zimbabwe, Rhodesia, and he said, I am not running any further than this. You've got my back against the sea, and I will die here.
Correct. A lot of people have taken that attitude. Many of us can leave if we want to. When I say many, maybe 20% could afford to leave or have access to foreign passports, etc. But many of those folk are saying, no, we're not leaving. We built this country. Who are these people to come along and say you stole the land? It's an absolute myth, and it's been perpetuated by the Marxists. They're trying to stage a communist revolution. They're calling it the second stage of the national democratic revolution, democratic being a useful word when it suits them. But it's an attempt at a full-blown communist state, which has been disastrous in Zimbabwe, disastrous in Venezuela, etc. So they don't seem to have learned these lessons. And unfortunately, they're trying to do it here. So they will find resistance. Not everybody is a pushover, and those who have the moral high ground are not the ANC. I can assure you. In many people's minds, they're absolute scoundrels and always have been.
Do you feel that what is happening in South Africa could happen in another country, and that this should be seen as a warning and another reason for the world to actually wake up to what is happening and stop it?
Well, I do, Rowena. I've always said that I think that South Africa is the blueprint for what is happening in Europe now. They rolled it out super slowly in South Africa, one little drip at a time, so that the people became accustomed to it. For instance, you used to have burglar bars on your windows, but that was it. Then you had to build an 8-foot wall around your property and put electric wire on top. This is if you could afford it. And electric gates to come in and out of the property. And then security gates on your front and back door. And then a security gate between the house and the sleeping quarters. And then be connected to a security company that would come if you shouted the alarm. And it happened slowly, very, very slowly, so that you became accustomed to it and just saw it as a way of life. And what the ANC, I think, did, as my opinion, was to roll it out slowly to see if the whites would rebel and if the rest of the world would step in and intervene. When that did not happen, nobody intervened. Nobody spoke about it. Then they started invading Europe, invading the UK, invading the USA. It is in other countries already. And if you'd looked at South Africa 24 years ago and seen what was coming and listened to the people who were shouting the alarm, then it might not have happened.
It is happening here, because if you have a look at all these boatloads of people, these so-called refugees, they're all men. They're all between the ages of 20 and 40. Not one of them is a child. Not one of them is a woman. Not one of them is an old person. It's all radicalized men. And if you watch the way they move when they get off the boats at the shore and they work as a team to move inland, like in Spain when that happened the other week, that's a fighting force. So what do you think? I mean, I just feel it is. And if we do not wake up to this, we are going to find ourselves in deep trouble. What does it take to wake people up? How do we wake people up? And this is why I want to try and push to get another show. I want to push to have more people reading that book, because your book will wake up at least a few people. And if we can wake up some people who will pass the book on, that is a bonus.
Indeed. I think we are a microcosm of what's happening in many places in the world. We are watching with great trepidation the invasion of Europe by third worlders. The excuse by the social engineers is that there's not enough young people in Europe to carry them through and to do all the jobs and to provide for the pensions and the national health, etc. Well, then why aren't they encouraging their own people to have more children? Give them tax breaks, offer education, instead of throwing the money at third worlders who are innocent. They should be using it on their own people. We're watching with great trepidation, and unfortunately, it seems that the electorate are either unaware or don't care. But it's time that
the wealthy don't care, because they have their walled gardens and their armed guards. So what if the people who no longer have arms can't defend themselves?
It's collateral damage. Who cares? And the world doesn't seem to care.
Yeah. Collateral damage everywhere. The governments are trying to breed literally a zombie race of people. This whole breed white out of thing, because white people are the ones who are causing all the trouble. Rubbish. White people are the ones who have actually produced, who have grown countries. If you have a look at what every black country, Nigeria, Congo, Kenya, all of them are sliding back into the bush. Zimbabwe, back in the bush. The roads that were once paved well roads are all just rubble now. You literally need a 4-wheel drive to get over them.
Zambia is also struggling now.
Yeah.
Mozambique, that was the most beautiful holiday destination.
and now you can't go there. Oh, are there any high-profile white people, celebrities, that have been murdered in South Africa? That might have made any form of headlines?
Well, there's been a number of British folk. One, I don't recall her name immediately, but she was quite a well-known breeder of border collies. She was brutally murdered, and they used an electric drill to drill into her knees to torture her to find out where she might get some money, etc. So there's been a few. There was a celloist, I think, from the London Symphony Orchestra, or one of the bigger orchestras in the UK, who was stabbed to death while hiking or bird watching just a couple of weeks ago. So there's been a few, yeah.
And a busload of Dutch tourists robbed, but I wouldn't say total celebrities, just people, you know, a lot of foreign people.
Why are we not hearing about these things, though? I mean, I know that when there was apartheid in Africa, because I knew a guy who was one of Eugene's lieutenants, and he brought me a whole lot of videos to copy across. That was in the old days of beta and all sorry, videos, really old stuff. He brought these videos for me to copy, and they were videos that had been confiscated from overseas journalists because the white police in South Africa did not want it to get out as to what the extent of the violence of black on black was. Why?
Well, once again, I can't answer that specific question, but I can answer your question as to why you're not hearing about it now. Because the media tends to be leftist, and what is happening now doesn't fit the narrative. The wonderful Rainbow Nation brought about by a democratic vote hasn't turned out quite as the rather naive leftists would have expected it to. But, you know, having been here for many centuries, we knew it would turn out like this. We've lived with these people for all these centuries. We've seen how things go when there isn't a civilizing influence, and they've been given free rein, and they are really just acting the way they've acted throughout Africa. Given a free hand, they descend into corruption and unfortunately barbarism, not all of course, but largely. And the narrative was that Mandela had set up this wonderful Rainbow Nation, and we're all going to sing Kumbaya and get along happily. Well, unfortunately, that hasn't happened. Strangely enough,
I think that the shed loading or load shedding.
Load shedding.
Yeah, I keep getting mixed up with it, but I just think it's disgusting. When South Africa was under white rule, we never, ever had this happen.
No.
It's absolutely appalling.
But the other thing is, all those countries that were basically involved in having apartheid abolished and the new government system implemented with Nelson Mandela, they are not going to turn around and say, oops, we were wrong.
Quite right, yeah.
Yeah, can you repeat what you said, because you faded out?
Sorry, my link is obviously it's taking strain here. I was saying quite right what Lee has just said, is that they thought, the leftists thought their work here is done, they can leave now and we'll happily carry on here. But, you know, they were naive and or just plain foolish, but it isn't like that, and it hasn't turned out well. And they don't want to admit that they were fooled into thinking that it was going to be great, and that Mandela was a wonderful guy. You know, he certainly was charismatic, but we knew him for what he was, and he was a communist, high-ranking communist. So we were at the communists have a 5-year, 25-year, and 50-year plan, unlike the West, which seems to have a 5-year plan in between presidents. But we are at year 24 now, so we got a year to go for the next phase. The 25-year plan is up, and now we stretch into the next one. And we're at, as the ANC says it straight out, we're at this the second phase of the national democratic revolution, with the emphasis on revolution. So they still have these cockamamie ideas about Marxist revolution, this is real banana republic stuff that we're heading into now. Expropriation of property without compensation, nationalization of everything. It's a Cuban type scenario, Zimbabwe scenario, Venezuela scenario. Banana republic stuff, and unfortunately, here we are, a first world people trapped in this this craziness that is all ideology based. There's no sense to it. They haven't thought it through. They don't know how the banks are going to handle it if they expropriate properties that are still mortgaged. They haven't thought it through. They just think, let's just grab everything and see how it goes. But we know it'll be a catastrophe. So we have to push back. We have to stop it.
The only positive thing, Anna said, the only positive thing is that Putin has offered welcome to the white South Africans. Not all of them. He's offered the farmers welcome in the into Russian areas.
But Rowena, the Afrikaans farmer, as Kieran so right there, they are as African as the black African. In fact, more so in South. Why should they be forced to leave their family farms? Their family farms that have been in the family for decades,
for generations,
blood, sweat, and tears into. They have treated their staff like family. They have given them housing, farm schools, water, clothing, medical attention, all of those things. Why should they be forced to leave their country where their people's bones are buried?
Yeah.
Because they're white.
I'm feeling as well. I mean, I don't think that a country belongs to anybody excepting for the people who build the country up. If a country would have remained in the bush, it is still no use to anyone. So therefore, the white people who got there immediately started building up. I mean, the first thing they built was the fort. In Cape Town, on the beachfront, a place to be safe, a place to have shelter. They didn't just roam. They weren't what do you call it when a person roams around and just goes nomadic? Nomadic. They weren't nomadic, and the thing is, a lot of the black people were. They would go where there was food for now, and then when that was done, they would move on to the next place. And
well, with all the looting and burning and destruction going on in our country, we're very soon going to end up back in the bush again, because everything has been broken down. The schools are being burnt. Our roads are atrocious. We are going backwards all the way.
And they're burning public transport. So I guess...
Oh, yes. Their own transport.
Yeah. So then they moan because they can't get from A to B.
I think it was Kieran who wrote the most amazing article on that. He wrote, I can't remember it. Maybe he remembers it word for word, but he said, wonderful society, that they burn the trains tonight and then burn another train tomorrow morning because the train they burnt last night didn't come. Kieran, do you remember that?
I do. I said we're a very, very strange country where if the trains run late, they burn them and then stand around the next day wondering where their trains are. If they want more housing, they burn houses. If they want better schooling, they burn the schools. If they want the fees to come down to the university, they burn down the university. It's a phenomenon which has taken hold here. It's utter stupidity, and unfortunately, the lowest common denominator here very often is the leader of the mob. And there's countrywide now, we have almost entire towns are being burnt down, and the excuse is always service delivery protests. Well, if you burn down the infrastructure, you're not going to get any service or services. It's just utter madness. Unfortunately, it seems to have captured the popular imagination that when you want something, when you have a demand, you burn something, and then you get attention. The town that I live in, we've had it on and off for the last few months, where the backyard dwellers, as they're called, who are streaming in here from the Transkei, Xhosa, Mandela's homeland, streaming into this town, which is not a big town, and it can't sustain the tens of thousands of people coming into it looking for work. And then they demand housing, and they're bringing in no skills, no investment. They don't pay any taxes, yet they're demanding houses be built for them. And when the houses aren't built fast enough for them for free, then they start burning the town down. So it's a craziness. You know, we're not prepared to live with this kind of anarchy. So that's why there is a strong push for secession, because the anarchy is just unacceptable to first world people like the Afrikaner and the white South Africans and the coloured folk, the middle class. It's unacceptable, and we won't stand for it. So the pushback has started, and the push for secession is growing stronger every day.
Which area would they go for? The Cape?
Yeah,
because you need to. Something that's really important is to have a seafront, so that you have a free route to be able to get stuff in without people shooting the planes down because you're landlocked.
Well, yes, but they're also legally under international law. Now, whether you like the UN, whatever you believe in them, doesn't matter. The point is they lay down international law. And under international law, the only place in South Africa that has a legal right to secession is the Cape. There. Only the Khoisan are there. So the Khoisan been accepted by the UN as the original peoples of South Africa, not by the ANC.
Yeah.
So they have the right under international law to secede the Cape.
Yeah.
Because it is their country. They were there first.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, I don't see, I can imagine that maybe Free State and Transvaal eventually have a right to secede because they were their own countries, accepted internationally as a country. But for now, the Khoi have the right to secede because they are accepted as the first people.
Yeah.
And they are willing to take hands with the white folks.
Yes, yes.
But they did that when we moved, when the white people came to the country. The fact that the Khoi were even marrying into Van Riebeck's group, you know, it shows that they were prepared to get on together.
Well, I must say, in the Khoi history, they were not so well treated by the white people. They were.
No, the white people ended up hunting them as well. But
Yes.
the whole hunting of them started by the black people thinking they were animals and believing that it was okay to hunt them down.
Yes.
And I don't know if I'm right, Kuan. The hunting of the Khoi, did that start when the English settlers arrived?
Well, no, the Khoi were the originals here. The black tribes moving down, in fact, practiced genocide on them. They would take the women as concubines, kill the men, and so they've always been under pressure from other tribes moving in. In terms of clashes between the whites and the Khoi, it was essentially over cattle. As someone mentioned earlier in the program, they were hunter-gatherers, and they would prey on the herds of the settlers.
Yeah,
so there was a lot of so there was a lot of stress there in terms of space, because the Khoi or the Khoisan, which are the more primitive tribe, or clan, they would need hunting grounds, and the settlers wanted pasturage. So there was a lot of conflict there, and undoubtedly the whites did kill a lot of the Bushmen, as they were called, and undoubtedly a lot of the black tribes killed them as well. So they've been vastly reduced in numbers, but what really reduced their numbers was smallpox, in the same way that in the United States the diseases that were brought in by the Europeans. There was
Wiped out a lot of Indians.
no resistance to it, yes. But the Bushmen now, as they still call themselves, despite everyone else calling them Khoi and San, the pure ones are very few in number now. They
Very
perhaps
small
only a few
families.
thousand. Yeah, the coloured folk, as they call themselves, are essentially the descendants of the mixed races and the Khoi and
Yeah.
San, and there's more of them than there are whites now. There's probably about 5 million. There's only about 4.5 million whites. So between the two, they make up about 20% of the population. The rest are black Africans, Bantu as we call them, and they hold the political power. So they're in charge, and it's up to them now to make this country succeed. We're here. We want to be part of it. We want to partake in the economy, but there's over 100 anti-war.
Yeah, what Kieran is saying is there are over 100 race-based laws in South Africa right now put in by the ANC, and nobody has really made a list of them, so we're not sure exactly how many. I had a professor in South Africa trying to itemize the law.
Minority.
And what this professor said was that if you look at any law passed in South Africa since 1994, every single one has got some anti-white sentiment in it. So he gave up. It was taking up too much time to make this list for me. But we do know that there are more anti-white laws in South Africa now than there ever were anti-black laws under apartheid.
Yeah.
Is that what you were saying, Ewan? Because we lost you for a moment.
You're quite right. There's over 100 anti-white laws that the ANC enforce, which they brought in to keep the whites out of the job market and out of government jobs, and to prevent them getting contracts with the government, and to enforce black directorships in white companies that are white established, white built, white owned. Family businesses are forced to take black directors, etc. So it's a total racist onslaught against the white minority, who are less than 10% of the population now.
You okay, Jeffrey?
Yes, fine, thank you, my dear.
I
Yes,
see that Lee has to leave. Her data has expired. Lee, I'll try and get you some money for new data. Just hang in there. I'll try and send them tomorrow.
Thank you so much for joining us, Lee. And we will try and push this. I need to actually see a way of getting my presentation across onto Discord. I'll link the whole of the show from tonight on there as well. We need to discuss another evening of doing this. Maybe if we give it about a 3-week break, so that we can get a lot more people involved.
Ewan, I will give you the date as soon as I have it, so that because you're booked for it, definitely.
Thank you.
And Kieran, I really want to get that book.
You'll enjoy it. It comes with a guarantee. You will enjoy it.
Yeah, I've got friends who would be very interested in it, because I've had people that I got to read my speech thing before I did it this evening, and she's the one lady said, "Are you for real?" And I said, "This is the truth for a change.
Yeah.
This is what really is happening in the country." But I haven't yet showed her the pictures. She's just seen the speech part. It's been an absolutely fabulous evening, I think. And I think that the people who have been with us, thank you so much, all of you, for joining us. We really do appreciate it. And please, all of you, share this as much as possible. If you
No
need,
doubt about that, my dear. That will happen.
yeah, we need to get this news out, and we need to find ways. None of these charities in the countries are doing anything to help the South Africans. It's always help this poor Sudanese, help that poor Syrian, help this, help that. But none of them say help the people who actually really need it. And the South African people are in dire need of it now. And it's been
Well, thank you
absolutely,
for that.
it's been
Thank you for that.
super having you with us, Kuan. It's been a real eye opener for even me. And
Well,
Karen, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, one can hardly say it's a pleasure talking about these things because it
Yeah.
isn't. But I do think it is our duty. And if the few of us that are willing to talk give up, we're never going to help South Africa. So we have an absolute God-given duty to do this.
Yeah, we do. So
Thank you all
so
for the
much.
discussion.
Yes, it's a pleasure.
Thank you,
so
Rowena.
Oh,
Okay, my
thank you
dear.
for coming in. And thank you everyone for joining us. God bless to everyone and try to have a peaceful night. I shall pray for everyone. And I will
Sleep well.
pray that we will find a way to get this thing more in the public eye. Anyway, everybody, God bless and good night.
Good
Thank
night.
you.
Good night, my dear.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Good night, dear.
And thank you.